Nintendo is no ordinary company, and this is no ordinary story. It began in 1889 as a Kyoto playing card business and kept changing identities until it finally found the future. By 1889, in Kyoto, Fusajiro Yamauchi was making hanafuda, small flower cards with bright ink and thick paper. Hanafuda means flower cards, and in Japan they lived in a strange space between family pastime and gambling culture. The room smelled of paste and paper fibers, and every deck depended on careful hands. Fusajiro was not building a toy empire. He was building a craft business that could survive on repeat customers. Nintendo began there, not with screens, but with cards people could hold, shuffle, and wager over. Japan was modernizing fast, and tastes were changing with it. That was the first danger. A business tied to one tradition can vanish when the culture moves. So Nintendo did something that would define it for the next century. It learned to treat identity as flexible, while treating entertainment as the constant. The company's first real product was not a character or a console. It was the habit of adapting before the market forced it. That habit would be tested by new generations, new owners, and a world that would not stay still. By 1949, Nintendo's future sat in the hands of Hiroshi Yamauchi, a 21-year-old grandson suddenly pulled into command. The stakes were simple. If he failed, the old card company could shrink into irrelevance. Hiroshi was young, severe, and not interested in running Nintendo like a family shrine. He forced relatives who opposed him out of the business, a brutal move that showed how he intended to rule. Nintendo was still a card company, but Japan after the war was changing at full speed. Handmade tradition was no longer enough. Scale mattered. Distribution mattered. Modern branding mattered. Hiroshi pushed Nintendo beyond old habits and toward mass-market cards. Then came one of the smartest decisions in the company's early history, a licensing deal, meaning permission to use another company's characters. In 1959, Nintendo put Disney characters on playing cards. The move connected an old product to a new generation of children and parents. It worked, but it also exposed a painful truth. A hit card business still had a ceiling, and Hiroshi wanted something bigger. By the 1960s, Hiroshi Yamauchi was hunting for Nintendo's next life and burning through ideas to find it. The risk now was not failure in one product, it was failure of direction. Nintendo tried to become more than a card company in ways that looked almost random from the outside. It moved into taxis, food, and hotels, chasing growth wherever it might appear. Some of those experiments felt less like strategy than desperation with a balance sheet. The company was searching for a larger market, but it had not found its language yet. Then chance walked through a factory. Gunpei Yokoi was working at Nintendo as a maintenance engineer, the person who keeps machines running. He had built a simple extending toy arm for his own amusement. Hiroshi saw it and recognized something rare, a small idea with mass appeal. In 1966, Nintendo released that toy as the Ultra Hand. It sold well, and the lesson hit hard. Nintendo did not need to imitate every industry around it. It needed to turn ordinary play into a product only it would make. By the 1970s, the next battlefield was electronics, and Nintendo was late to it. The stakes were brutal. Toys could fade after one season, but electronics could define the next decade. The company moved from mechanical toys toward electronic games and arcade cabinets, coin-operated game machines built for public spaces. It was a bigger gamble than cards, and a colder one. Plastic buttons, blinking lights, and circuit boards replaced paper and ink. Nintendo even worked with Magnavox to distribute the Odyssey in Japan, giving it a closer look at the home console business. But arcades were where the pressure really built. One early export push centered on a game called Radar Scope. It did not perform well in the United States, leaving Nintendo with unsold arcade cabinets and a problem that cost real money. Hiroshi needed a replacement game fast. He turned to a young designer named Shigeru Miyamoto. That decision produced Donkey Kong in 1981, And suddenly, Nintendo had something far more valuable than a machine. It had characters people remembered. By 1983, Nintendo was ready to bring its games home with the family computer, better known as the Famicom. The risk was huge. A failed console could drag the whole company backward. Early hardware problems forced Nintendo to respond quickly, a reminder that electronics punish mistakes in public. But the machine found its footing in Japan. Then came the harder challenge, America. In 1983, the US video game market crashed under a flood of weak software and retailer distrust. A crash, in this case, meant stores no longer believed game machines were worth the shelf space. Nintendo entered that market anyway. In 1985, it launched the Nintendo Entertainment System in the United States with strict control over hardware, software, and quality. That control could look harsh, but it rebuilt trust. Super Mario Bros. Gave the machine its smile. The seal of quality gave stores and parents a reason to believe. Nintendo was no longer just surviving old trends. It was setting rules for an entire industry. After that, Nintendo kept proving the same point in different forms. The danger never left. Hit-driven businesses are fragile because one bad cycle can make yesterday's giant look old overnight. Nintendo answered with new reinventions, the Game Boy, the Wii, and later, the Switch. Each move came from the same old instinct. Do not compete only on raw hardware power. Compete on the experience people remember. That sounds obvious now, because Nintendo made it feel obvious. It was not obvious when rivals were chasing technical supremacy and realism. Nintendo kept returning to the same question. What makes play unmistakably fun? That question is why a card maker from the 19th century could outlast entire generations of electronics companies. Most businesses protect their identity until it hardens into a trap. Nintendo treated identity like a tool. As of 2025, the Nintendo Switch has sold more than 150 million units. Not bad for a company that started with paper cards in Kyoto. Nintendo's story is not a straight line from founder to mascot. It is a record of repeated self-reinvention. It is not a straight line from founder to mascot. It is a record of repeated self-reinvention. Cards, toys, arcades, consoles, handhelds, guided by one stubborn belief that play matters more than format. As of 2025, the Switch has sold more than 150 million units, and the company behind it is still, in some deep sense, doing the same job Fusajiro Yamauchi started in Kyoto, giving people something delightful to hold for.